For the world around us, Easter is just a day or a long weekend. And I really love how our society celebrates Easter. I mean, I like a good chocolate egg as much as the next guy. And the flowers are beautiful. And I really appreciate the time off and, in an ordinary year, the opportunity to gather with my family. But Easter's not just a day for the church. Easter is a season. For Christians, that entire period between Easter Sunday and Pentecost is all Easter all the time. And you might be disappointed to learn that actually doesn't mean that we get to eat chocolate for 50 days straight. That's not it. That's not what it's about. But what then is the reason why Easter lasts so long for the church? Well, it is the acknowledgement of the importance and the impact of a singular event. The resurrection of Jesus is not something that we can come to terms with just one day's reflection. It is something that changes everything for us, changes our priorities, changes how the world works and how we think of it. As a result, therefore, one of the things the church has traditionally done during this entire season is that for a period of time we actually stop reading the Old Testament, apart from the Psalms, on Sunday mornings, and instead read exclusively from the book of Acts, which helps us to understand the difference that the events of Easter made for the early church. So I would say that one of my jobs during this entire season as a leader in the church is to help us all reflect on the difference that it makes that Jesus died on the cross and that he rose 3 days later. And that is indeed what I've been trying to do this year. A couple of weeks ago, for example, I tried to show how the resurrection of Jesus makes us think differently about the wealth and possessions we have. And that instead of seeking our security and comfort from these things, Easter makes us think creatively about how we can use these things for the sake of the kingdom of God. And then last week, I spoke about how the story of Jesus' bodily resurrection sets us free from being controlled and manipulated by guilt, shame, and fear. Today, I want to focus on the really extraordinary passage we read this morning from the first letter of John, and what it might teach us about the death and resurrection of Jesus and what it means for us. John writes this: "We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us." This is a very simple statement, but it contains meaning that kind of blows me away. John is saying that one of the key reasons why Jesus came, why he went to the cross, is to teach us what love is. And I can already hear some objections to that idea. Don't we already know what love is, after all? Each one of us has relationships in our lives, relationships that we understand in terms of love. We have significant others and close friends and parents and children and grandchildren and extended family, and we know how strongly we feel about these people in our lives. And yeah, I know we sometimes fall short in our best intentions for these people that we love. We sometimes get irritable or snippy or resentful, and we hurt the people we love. But however imperfectly, yes, we would say we know what love is. We know what love looks like. So what then is John saying? Well, he's saying that Jesus went to the cross clearly to teach us about new depths of love. To understand what he means by that, I think we should look over to our gospel reading this morning. In it, Jesus is reflecting on the very same topic, actually, what it means to lay down one's life. It is part of a longer reflection about how Jesus is like a good shepherd, which kind of, in a way, makes all of this talk about laying down your life just a little bit weird. I mean, take seriously what he's saying here for a minute. Put yourself in the position of hiring a shepherd. You put an ad in the newspaper, you're looking for somebody good, somebody that you can trust to take care of your sheep. And then guess what? The first person you interview comes in and goes on and on about how at the first sign of trouble, he will go out and throw down his life. Just die in front of the wolf or lion or bear. Is that really what you're looking for in a shepherd? Someone that ready to lay down his life? Is laying down your life really part of the job description of a shepherd? I get the part where Jesus goes on to say the hired hand who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. That all makes good sense to me. Yes, you want a shepherd who's not going to be afraid to engage, who's willing to take some risks. But are you really looking for someone who is willing so easily to lie down and die at the first opportunity? When Jesus speaks of laying down his life, we all know what he's talking about, right? He's not speaking about what shepherds normally do. He's talking about loving the people, loving us. So much that when it came to it, he was willing to go all the way, even to the cross, to demonstrate that love. But Jesus surprisingly phrases that sacrifice in terms of everyday life, how on a day-to-day basis a shepherd can love and take care of the sheep. He's basically saying the same thing as our reading from 1 John about laying down his life. Jesus taught us what love is and how transformative it can be in the ordinary situations of life, like when a shepherd is taking care of the sheep. And no, of course, we don't really expect a shepherd to throw his life away at the first sign of an attack against the sheep. But if he does love them, yes, he will take risks for their sake. He will stand up against the wolves, not back down just because the situation is dangerous. And Jesus is saying that that's what love is really about. And for me, that adds so much color to what the passage in 1 John goes on to say. Little children, he goes on, let us love, not in word or speech, but in love and action. What Jesus teaches us about love is that more than anything. Yes, of course, Jesus did talk about love. He talked about how much he loved his disciples, how much he loves us. But it's his actions that teach us what love is, not his words. And it's honestly too easy often to talk about love without allowing it to influence our actions or the truths of our lives. This can be true on a very personal level. How many times do we fail to love the people who are closest to us in action? We say we love them. But how many times, for example, do we let the stress or anger that we have pent up inside us all day long because we don't dare talk about it to strangers? How many times do we let that out against the people we love because we know they'll let us get away with it? How many times do we act selfishly because we know that we can rely on them to love us anyways? Loving in word and speech is easy, but loving in action and truth, that's harder. But it's when we move from the personal to that larger scale, when we move from the individual sheep to the whole flock, that this becomes even harder to figure out. Because it's easy to talk about our love for fellow human beings. It's easy to talk about how we don't see race or color or creed when we look at other people. It's easy to say all lives matter. Saying the right thing is something we can all learn to do pretty easily. Now, the problem comes with truth and with action, and that's something we've seen again and again over this past year. When it comes to treating actual Black lives or Indigenous lives or minority lives as if they matter, that's harder. The problem comes with acknowledging that minority groups in this country live in daily fear of violence because of who they are, and actually doing something about that. Or to take another example, I recently saw a list. And on this list, in one column, it listed all of the things that young men do to make sure that they are not attacked or raped. And in the second column was a list of all of the things that young women do for the same reason. And of course, in the first column on the men's side, there was nothing. But the list for the women went on and on and on. What does it mean? What does it mean? That there's an entire group of people in our society, about half the population, who live in constant vigilance because they know they are not safe. In that instance, what does loving the women of our society mean? Because it has to mean more than just saying that they're beautiful or that we're fond of them. It has to mean truth, and it has to mean action. Action that makes a difference in that unacceptable situation. We say that we are the people of the resurrected Christ. But according to what it says in 1 John, that should mean that we are people who have learned from the example of Christ and know what love means in truth and in action. It means that we are willing to lay our lives down for the sake of the sheep. And my question is, what does that look like in the modern world? That is played out in many ways. But let's give one simple way in our present crisis. I think loving like that right now means going out and getting vaccinated as soon as you are able to do so. And to do it with the first vaccine that's available to you. I gotta say, this whole phenomenon we've seen of people shopping around for the vaccine they think is best for them personally, maybe rejecting this one because of its apparent lower efficiency or this one because of minuscule higher risks. This has all been very disheartening. Choosing to do what is best for the whole community under this circumstance should hardly be difficult. Under normal circumstances, I would hardly describe it as laying down your life. But apparently enough people find it hard enough to do that I think we need a reminder that that is what love looks like in this present situation. And there are also more difficult opportunities to lay your life down and follow the example of Christ by loving today. In our present context, I believe that includes speaking up, as uncomfortable as it may be, and calling out all of the ways in which people are not being valued. For example, during this pandemic, we've seen all the ways in which people who belong to certain groups have generally been able to do all right, while others have not. We've seen how people who are relatively wealthy and have the ability to work from home or to take off time when they're sick have actually come through this thing relatively unscathed. But many of these people have also found it much easier to become vaccinated. So much so that they've been able to be choosy about their vaccines. But meanwhile, we have this other group of people, generally younger, who often belong to racial minorities. And they are people who work with the public or who work in packed factories or warehouses. These are people who generally have little power and no ability to stay home. And the evidence seems to indicate now that the pandemic has been spreading like wildfire among them. And yet, in many cases, they have not even yet been prioritized for vaccination. This, my friends, is a situation that endangers the public health of all of us. And what's it fueled by? It is fueled by the inequities that have been in our society for a very long time. What does love look like when that is the situation? What does it look like to lay down your life for the sake of the sheep? It's got to be about more than word and speech. It's got to be about action and truth. Yeah, I get it. Many of us would like to live our lives of Christian faith quietly, not causing any fuss or friction. We would like to love in word and speech, but not in ways that might mess with our comfortable routine. But the reality of the death and resurrection of Jesus should push us towards a love that speaks the truth and is seen in action. That means a willingness to lay down our lives. That is the difference that the Easter story makes. It is not the easiest thing, God, to be an Easter people, because it means living out a love that includes laying down our lives, stepping up, not being afraid. Let us learn such love from Jesus. Amen.